Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Brian. We're going to wrap up this week with an album review, where we go through an entire album track by track, exploring each song in isolation and their part of the larger whole. A couple of years ago, we checked out Voivod's 1989 thrash classic, Nothing Face. I didn't know how to take it. I think even the title of the video was something like "I don't understand this" or something along those lines. It was intense. Today we're going to be revisiting some Voivod, their second most recent album, 2018's The Wake. I'm going to be completely honest here. I am not ready for this. Partially because I think it's way too early in the morning to be listening to thrash music. But secondly because it is Voivod. Now I don't know what 3 decades almost has done to the band. Maybe they've slowed down, maybe they've wanted to explore things differently, bands change over time, who knows. But if this album is anything like Nothing Face, I feel I'm going to be incredibly overwhelmed once again. We have 8 tracks here today, 55 minutes in total. However, the final track is 12 and a half minutes long, so the average length for the rest of the songs are about 5 to 6 minutes. Being that there's only 8 tracks, I'd wager that we're going to stop after each track and discuss it, especially as some of them are into the 6 and 7 minute lengths. But we'll see how things go as we get through this album. Let's kick things off with the opening track, Obsolete Beings. There's a darkness in the music. Interesting vocals. The first part sounded more like Ozzy, where the second part sounded more like Motorhead. There's an off-kilter element to the guitar riffs too, I find interesting. Like, it's very swirling. Yeah, that's some fun syncopation on the drums. Little tempo increase there. was sad. Why was that so melancholic? Very fun passing of the baton. Interesting that the guitar oscillates between two sides because the opening of the track was very oscillating. Is this going to transition? Very... It's that sonar sounds. All right. I do think I will rewind that back just a little bit to make that transition more natural. Very interesting track. By Voivod standard, this was incredibly digestible. Like I had mentioned earlier, it still has a little bit of thrash components to it. We have that faster riff that we open the track on. But a lot of this kind of took place at a slower tempo and a slower time feel. The riffs themselves weren't fast, but also the song itself wasn't fast. The vocals even, there's a high reverb element to some of it that reminds me more of Ozzy than anything else. The chorus, I think it's the chorus anyways, because I kind of have this A-B section, which is the lighter, more almost psychedelic section, and then the heavier, more driven section. Those are definitely an A-B, though I don't know if lyrically that's a verse chorus. But he puts a lot of grit on his vocals at that section, and it comes across more of the vocalist from, is it Motorhead, I think? That's what I said earlier. She's got that grasp, it's got that energy. The rasp, not grasp, of tracks like Ace of Spades, which I think is Motorhead. I found that to be a really interesting dichotomy there. Because when you pair that with the music, you get something really odd. Psychedelic sci-fi is what I get through most of this. There are sections in here that certainly feel otherworldly or possibly alien. It's I don't know, it's the expanded mind. I don't know if psychedelic is necessarily the word that best describes this, but it's where my gut tended to land when I tried to figure out what this was doing. There's something about it that feels familiar but different, in the same way that psychedelic rock approaches it. I don't think I would necessarily call this music like stoner adjacent, but it definitely carries some of the vibes that the drug users of the psychedelic music era certainly evoked within their music. But what's different here, I think, is that it kind of takes those vibes and instead of going for something that feels expansive, opening up the mind kind of vibe, seeing things from another perspective or plane, it uses that as a jumping off board to explore the esoteric almost. I think this is where the sci-fi vibes come in. It's specific chordal ideas that are paired with and contrasted to that psychedelic element that absolutely leans into alien, outside of our planet. And maybe it's just because Voivod tends to explore, I say tends to as if I've listened to a lot of their work. But in what I've heard from them, they tend to explore space. Sci-fi themes are kind of prevalent within them. But I hear that here too. An opening of the mind to something totally unknown, not just to expand it, but to see what else is out there. And it's not always positive. I find that a lot of psychedelic music, particularly with lyrics and musical themes about opening the mind, exploring what's possible, seeing what's beyond the realm of sight, that kind of idea, it's always positive, you know? They they use their drugs to create music that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. It unlocked potential, and that kind of feeling is stuck within that genre of music, whether the people making it actively used drugs or not. In order, in the process of writing the music, it was influenced by people who did. But what if it wasn't a positive effect? And that's where I think a lot of this song lies. It's kind of scary in places. It honestly goes for haunting vibes. There's also a lack of feeling of a groundedness. It never really feels like I have a strong footing underneath me. It's it's exploring these areas that I just feel less confident within. And somehow it all came to a head in the solo. And the more that I listened to the solo, which I will honestly say I was surprised that it wasn't shredding. For some reason, that's what I think of with Voivod. I'm pretty sure that's because of Nothing Face. Um, Very minimal shred here, if any, really. There was a couple of faster lines, but it was a rather measured idea. But as fast as some of the riffs could be, this feels like it was bogged down, a weight pressed upon them. And the more that I listen to the notes and the bending of the notes and the way the guitar conveys these sounds, both the production, I'm sure that there's some string bends or maybe the whammy bar being used here, but there's also electric ideas as well, modulation of effects going on. This guitar sounds sad. I didn't really pick up on it, maybe until halfway through the solo, but as we got to the end and we had all these rising ideas pushing to a peak that just kind of tapers off and falls, and it's just crying on the way down. And I found this to be interesting because it evokes some of the ideas I had heard previously. I had mentioned the description of the song being very spiral like. Some of the riffs, the single note riffs that kind of arpeggiate up and down, it's not really just a rising and falling of the chord that we're in, but there is general arpeggiation, movement up and down the chord, just not always in a perfect peaks and valleys sort of oscillation. But at times it just kind of hovers in an area, sometimes dipping in notes slowly, but there is a general descent. It's not chaotic like a tornado, but it is cyclical. And it's not something I feel has my best interest at heart. being in this atmosphere does not make me feel safe or comforted or secure. I don't necessarily think it's malevolent, but I'm kind of spooked being here, and I'm filled with maybe not dread, but there is a fear, there's also a sorrow. I just want to end this sort of emotional storytelling component of this analysis to say that Voivod is not necessarily a band I would have thought if someone had asked me for a list of metal bands who write emotionally evocative and deep music. This track here is multifaceted, it's nuanced. Granted, it is still just 3 riffs mainly. 2 riffs mainly? Yeah, I think there's 2 main riffs in here, a couple of drum patterns, and the vocals have their verse and their chorus. I think well, we do have the bridge at the end, which slows down quite a bit. That is a distinct vocal melody, but it's a pretty straightforward verse, chorus, solo, chorus, and then an outro track. It's fairly iterative in a lot of ways, but harmonically it stands out to me. It is telling a story with depth to it. I find that to be really interesting. Coming back to this idea about the technicalities of it, what's on the paper, it is a rather straightforward track. The vocal melody is simple, it's quite memorable. The riffs, there's kind of 2 of them. There's the more driven one that kicks the song off. Well, oh geez, I forgot about the we'll have to talk about that too. The bookending of this track using like field recordings or sound effects. But once the guitars kick in, we have this driven, just pedal tone, like 6 or 8 notes, and then a little bit of a driven idea, and then we come back to this pedal tone, then we drive again. This is the chorus riff. It has a lot of energy to it. It has a lot of direction. The verse riff is again, that's the spirally one. It's more unsettling, but it is just single note ideas. The drums are pretty straightforward. They keep the tempo and the rhythm throughout most of this. They have a solid groove. They're not really trying to be anything other than just a human metronome for most of this. We did have that really neat syncopated section coming out of the second chorus, I think, into the bridge or something like that. And that was kind of neat, emphasizing between the beats where the guitars are emphasizing on the beat, and we kind of get that a very groovy section in a track that is mostly weighed down by weight. So I found that to be a nice little diversion from their general sounds. But as far as Voivod goes, this is a pretty typical structure, kind of typical riffage. It's not chaotic, it's digestible, it's not too fast. I get this, I feel this. Voivod was Nothing Face was an album that washed over me. I don't really think I got too much out of it other than being overwhelmed. It was a stressful album. Maybe not necessarily in what it was saying, but in my reception of what they were doing. I connect with this track. I think this is very well done. Very different, though, too. If you're a fan of Voivod's other work, how do you feel about this track? I was going to say album, but we still have 7 tracks ahead of us. This could be just a way of easing the listener into a more traditional thrash album. But at least here from the start, this would not be what I expect from them, and I find that I enjoyed this quite a bit more. I guess that's about it. I mean, I mentioned that we needed to talk about the intro and outro, but what do I say about them? Other than the idea of oscillation, we have the idea of sonar within this. There's bubbling, almost like it's underwater in the outro. But the idea of oscillation pops up all throughout this track, and I don't know what it means. I just the oscillation of sonar, but also guitar just bouncing back and forth between two notes at the end there that kind of shifts into that sonar sound. I don't know what it's all supposed to represent, but I certainly have a feeling here. There's isolation in the outro at the bare minimum. Assuming that we're talking about some sort of submarine, maybe, given the water and the sonar and just the darkness that kind of surrounds all that. Submarine life feels pretty isolating. It kind of matches that vibe. But there's nothing else in the song that told me that. And I mean, unless what if we take being somewhere that we aren't used to or that feels foreign to us, that feels that we can't really find our footing in, but also sadness. I mean, maybe it's depression from being in a submarine for a long time. Obsolete beings. Are submarines obsolete beings? I don't think so. It's not a being to begin with, but I don't know. It's a neat way to introduce and to leave this track, but I'm not really sure what it has to do with anything. So let's hit some lyrics, see if that can't shed some light on some of the other aspects of this track. We have some Gen Xers railing against technology. Such a novel set of lyrics here. Jokes aside, I've already kind of voiced my distaste somehow multiple times on this channel about lyrics that are basically phones bad, social media bad, humans are dumb now. It's usually not done very well. I kind of agree with that here too. These are eh. It's a track about how we're addicted to social media. Like, I don't know, dude. I've heard one, maybe two sets of lyrics that actually do this in an interesting way. This is not one of them. This goes in the same pile as Frost of just vapid songs about how social media is ruining our lives. The first verse, scrolling down in paradise, absorbed by your next device. You live alone, cast away and insecure. A dream is gone and your time is done. You've wasted your life staring at a screen, looking at other people's lives. The second verse says, obsessed with comments, distracted by silly scenes, hypnotized and plastified, you forgot to live your own life, wasting your days. I mean, is it wrong? No, social media is certainly an issue. Are these lyrics interesting? Are they saying something that hasn't been said? And granted, this is 2018, but even before then, we've had people singing about this. They're not bad lyrics, and as I try to always comment when it comes to this topic, more people saying it is not a bad thing. Not everybody listens to punk music. Not everyone listens to rebellious music. Not everyone listens to, whatever genre is doing it. So for them to introduce it from a thrash metal-esque perspective to presumably an older audience, as they're from an older time. They probably have an older fan base. Maybe they don't listen to the newer music by the younger kids who are saying this stuff too. But for me, having heard the same fairly vapid lyrics of just this stuff's addicting and you're wasting your life, and that's all that it has to say, I'm just kind of over it. I've been over it for years. This is definitely a me thing. Me is the audience here. If you never heard these lyrics before, maybe this is an eye-opening song for you. But that's it. Those are the verses. People like to look at their phones and their lives are passing them by. And that's about all the depth you'll get out of this track. The chorus just says, it's time for you to go in the trash. Your time's up. Each chorus is different, and I will give them credit for that. They say the same thing with different words. The first one talks about becoming useless, that you're going to be replaced by someone else. You can't improve, or you should improve, but you don't, so you're going straight in the bin. The second one says that you're out of function and your model's discontinued, you're stacked on a shelf and no one wants you. The third one, interestingly, points towards the influencers, a word I'm not cool with, but what better way to describe these kinds of people? It says you're being a brand all of your life and you're just used to advertise for someone else. It says a follower goes with the flow and they'll never ever know that they are no more. So it talks about how both the influencer and the audience of the influencer, the follower, are just tools being used in marketing for corporations. That both of them are being used and neither of them are making thoughts of their own. That, I think, is a fine point I don't see too often in here. I will give them a point for that. The outro here, which they describe as a bridge, interesting. It says a new era has arrived. Is there a use for mankind? The time is still ruled by the sky. So wondering if we have a purpose here. I find that to be interesting, not necessarily in 2018, but certainly post 2024. If you follow the dead internet theory, a lot of the engagement metrics on social media is mostly bots. That actual human people, if we remove the bots from the equations, likes, comments, retweets, subscriptions, all that stuff would be much lower across the board for pretty much everyone on every platform. And as AI is used to create more and more content. And while I'm usually adverse to that word, I think in this case it is accurate, whether that is AI videos on TikTok or AI posts on Reddit or Facebook. You have computers, bots, responding to AI, which is computers. And there's just no human here anymore. But the metrics are what's important. It's what drives the value for these platforms. Humans actually aren't necessary anymore. I find that to be interesting. However, when we bring in the final chorus, bringing the corporate element into this about using people to advertise to other people in a way that looks organic, grassroots types of stuff, you do need people still to buy the products. I think humans still have a function in a generally capitalistic society, which, while they didn't start with that direction, they landed on it, and it is the most recent stanza to this finale. So I find that to be an interesting sentence or question to pose, given that they kind of already answered it. But the final line, the time is ruled by the sky, is that simply the statement that even if humanity died off, we would still have time cycles? Nature does all of that. Animals have their seasonal cycles. The sun will still rise and fall. We'll still have the night-day cycle. Like, is that what he's trying to say here? Even if mankind has no use, the earth is still what it is? I don't know. It's an interesting topic. I suppose that the general feelings of unease and sorrow in here is about people who have realized their lives have been passed by because they've spent so much time in the digital world. Maybe it's an elegy for humanity at large. Maybe it's all of the above. Maybe the guitar solo can represent multiple things. I do find, though, the sort of alien, unknown vibe throughout the verses is interesting, as the verses are not really foreign concepts. Again, I'm coming at this almost a decade late on this, but even at the time, I think I had already heard my fair share of tracks covering this topic. This has been something that, if not music, certainly articles have already been written starting at the beginning of the 2010s about social media obsession, and we were already looking into it scientifically and psychologically. So this topic itself had been covered to death at this point, at least without music, but certainly within by some bands. To tie that vibe to this topic just feels not too cohesive to me personally, at least. But I suppose maybe for them it was. Here's another thing that I think is worth coming at this. I certainly know people on the older side, Gen X, maybe even specifically, who are completely attached to the phone at the hip. Can't leave the home without it. If there's any downtime, they are scrolling through Facebook like a fiend. And especially now, as Facebook has gotten into short form video content, swiping videos. So I don't think that this idea of being lost in technology is something specifically tied to the younger generation. Certainly, millennials and Zoomers have kind of grown up with the Zoomers in particular, with TikTok just in every part of their life, and growing up on that, and YouTube as well, YouTube Shorts, especially for some of the younger generation. It certainly is a problem, but I don't think it's necessarily exclusive to the younger generations. And it's weird to say younger when I'm coming up on 40, but yeah, I mean, I still feel like the younger generation, I suppose, for one reason or another. But it does seem like they are possibly approaching this from being outside of that bubble, outside of that world. Maybe at least the lyricist doesn't have social media, doesn't understand the addiction to social media, but sees it. They've never felt it themselves, but they see it in the world around them. And so it does feel like a distant foreign world to them. They didn't grow up in it, they didn't grow into it, but they see everyone else around them just constantly on their phones. And from that perspective, I think that this sound works well with the topic. Almost like you're watching a sci-fi film where everybody's been brainwashed by some sort of new technology out there, and you're on the outside looking in, wondering, why would you have bought this? Why is this happening? Obviously, it looked like a scam. I didn't buy it. And there's always that, the hero, the protagonist of the story, who saw through the ruse from the beginning. Everyone else got brainwashed buying this new technology. And I think from that perspective, I can feel the vibe of this song, but I don't personally feel connection to this atmosphere with these lyrics the way that maybe Voivod does. All right, let's dive into the next track then. The End of Dormancy, which sounds like it might bounce off of these lyrics right here and explore the rise of humanity once again if they come out of their dormant or latent state of hypnotized by devices. I don't know if this is a concept album or not, but the two themes are just very closely linked. Let's kick it. Oh, that was actually a train. I didn't talk much about the bass last track, but it also had some really... One second, that's Orb. I said End of Dormancy. Come on, teaser.
To the sky, ocean of silence. Nothing inside, only storms in the distance. Here on meeting point at 0 hour. It looks like this is far from over. Signals coming from deep space, giant void. Magnetic shields are ready to deploy. Unknown waves are rumbling stronger.
always thought this could be real.
Okay.
Always assumed that it was near. Not having a single doubt. Not having a second thought. The way, this is the end of dormancy. The way, something from the bottom of the sea.
That's sort of release right there.
These kinds of things can be revealed. Who would have thought? Who would believe? Fear of the unknown will stay on. Because no God has ever saved anyone. The way from the seabed underneath. The way, millions of years of dormancy. The way, we charge by the waves of energy. The way, this thing will change our destiny.
A little bit of a march here. Oh, is this
All units, ready to counterattack.
Planets Mars? A classical track? Inspired by that? I'm not speaking in full thoughts. I'm trying to figure this out. Kind of Pink Floyd-esque.
Eyes over my head. Where am I? Someplace I've never seen. Some hidden secret facilities.
I remember what happened that day about a mission failure. Should I pretend that I don't
Acceleranzo?
know? I don't know. I don't know. I have a feeling it is time to go. Go. I have this can, and I'll tell you why. I am the only one to survive. I am the only one to survive. They're after me. They gotta get me. This is what happens when you know too much.
Choice chords. Yeah, the big, I think those were toms actually, but they were evoking the sound of timpanis there at the end. It just kind of goes into the kind of like paralleling ideas of Gustav Holst's planets. Particularly, I believe Mars is the movement in there. And there's parts in the middle of this track that remind me of it too. In fact, that dun 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 da 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 on the guitar part, that particularly evokes ideas of planets. But the timpanis, man, at the end, slowing down. I don't think there's anything in here that I would say is directly borrowed from that work. But there's certainly a tip of the hat, a little homage to that work within this. And there's parts of it that feel very much like it. Everything, oh, the march too. Moving to the snare drum and just having that very rigid rhythm there with the guitars kind of coming underneath that with a pedal tone. That's another section that's very reminiscent of it. It's very interesting how often that kind of cropped up within the back half of this track. So that's kind of neat. A little parallel to some classical music in here. Other than that, this is an incredibly theatric track. Several sections feel like they're designed to create scenes within a film. And we're just kind of jumping from one idea to the next. I don't have a strong idea of what this song is doing or exploring on the whole. Honestly, I found it to be rather confusing on a first-time listen, as it did jump around between 5, 6, maybe different ideas and themes and atmospheres, emotions within such a short amount of time. We do hear quite a bit of variety on this track, technically speaking. The guitar riffs are, well, kind of less thrash than even Obsolete Beings. In fact, there's several sections of this song that are just focused on pedal tone, allowing the vocals to be a lead melody on top of completely static ideas. The drums also pair into this, not really evoking the full use of the kit, but usually just focusing on 1 or 2 instruments within the drum kit and working within rigid patterns, usually the same rhythmic ideas that the guitars are focused on. We did kick off with a little bit more energy though. Still heavy, but a nice bit of display on all the instruments there, the drums, the guitars, the bass. Actually, I guess that's what I want to focus on because that does seem to be rather consistent on this track. This is a heavy song. Almost every section of this track is either focusing on some sort of pedal tone to weigh the song down, to focus on the lowest note of an idea, repetitive, simple patterns rhythmically. There's not a lot of syncopation in here or odd rhythmic devices. It's all very grounded and rooted in rigidity. The tempo is a bit on the slower side as well, and all of this kind of creates something that feels closer to maybe doom or even stoner rock. Certainly something that emphasizes texture and atmosphere and a slower movement beyond anything else. For most of this song, it feels like dragging your feet through mud. But there's also a general lack of energy on like an emotional scale. A defeat, maybe lethargy, but one that feels more negative. I mean, lethargy is not usually a positive element. Sloth, that's certainly not one of the seven deadly sins. But a complacency that has been learned is kind of what I feel from this. And maybe that's because I'm coming off of the themes of obsolete beings, and I've already talked about how that I think pairs well with this idea of dormancy as a word in the title of this. But I do feel that there's a part of this that feels like there's a lack of resistance to this dredging of the mud. That this slow tempo isn't fought against. There isn't much of a desire to increase the speed or momentum of this song. It is sort of just something that's accepted. I do like how the end of this track ramps up with a massive accelerando, constantly increasing the speed of the song. And the title is The End of Dormancy, so maybe this is a time to take control back. I won't say that the end of this track pushes real hard into this type of resistance or rebellion, but it certainly presents the idea that this might be on the horizon in a way that the rest of the track doesn't feel like it's a thought at all. Beyond that, I think the only thing I want to bring up is something I kind of touched on with Obsolete Beings, which is the vocal variety. I don't remember this being a thing for Voivod. It's possible that if I go back and watch my video of Nothing Face, I did actually bring this up. It's just not something that I filed away into Voivod's folder in my filing cabinet in my brain after listening to that album. But I do find him to fit this sort of theatrical presentation. Throughout the 5 or 6 different sections on this track, there was probably a good 3 to 4 different vocal inflections or delivery styles. I'm not going to necessarily say he's putting on voices throughout this track in order to create different vibes, but you can certainly hear different delivery styles that seem to fit the vibes of what's going on. There's also some spoken word in here, which maybe pushes the story forward. I think we only had one of those in the middle, something about, I don't know. I don't remember the words precisely, but the concept was like all hands on deck, like everyone get ready for something. And I enjoy that. I'm a big fan of vocal variety anyways. I'm a big fan of theatrical music in general. And for this to feel like it has a visual component to it, like this could be a band on a stage with some sort of acted production around them, I think works really well. I think also putting the production elements on the vocals too, such as having a bit of compression during that spoken word part as if it was coming over a speaker, is a nice way to just embellish some of these ideas and add that theatricality to it. So I'm a big fan of how all that's kind of coming together, and the general sonic palette of this album is it's fun. Not a term I'd used for this band previously, but it is fun. And I appreciate their almost like design vision for this on where sound design should be and what each section should sound and feel like from a production aspect, not necessarily from chords, harmonies, melodies, but just what's the general vibe of it, and what is our engineer going to have to do to create that vision. And I think that this is one of those albums that so far, we're only a quarter of the way in, but so far seems to be that it isn't a separate idea where the band makes some music and then they go to an engineer to record it. It almost feels like it's all done hand in hand, where the engineering side is at least thought of while the songs are being written and practiced to be recorded. So I'm enjoying that aspect of it. Let's dive into some lyrics on this one. We'll see what's going on there. Well, here's a fun little 90s style story. We have some people deep underwater, presumably in a submarine, which I find intriguing, though also the very end of Obsolete Beings, after having the sonar and the bubbles, then has a train stopping. I'm still not quite sure how to interpret that, but at least the sonar blipping and oscillation is kind of related to where the album goes into the end of Dormancy. But it talks about seeing some unknown waves and rumbling that are certainly confirmed to come from underneath the water. It says that I always thought this could be real, always assumed it was near, not having a single doubt. But this is the end of Dormancy. Something from beneath the bottom of the sea has awoken. Then says that these kind of things can't be revealed because who would have thought and who would have believed any of this? After millions of years of dormancy, recharged by the waste of energy, this thing will change our destiny. Then we have the speaker that says, to all vessels, keep your position and ready for counterattack. We have a section that says, under the surface, gravitational waves, abyssal hurricane from the alien base, transfictional sky engulfed in flames, too late to retreat, too amazed to relate. Basically saying that whatever this beast thing is, might not even be a beast. It might be an entire civilization rising up from beneath the water's surface, or the surface of deep underwater. The water surface would be at the top. That it's modulating reality, or maybe it's got its own reality. I don't know. But it's amazing, he says. So amazing to look at, but just there's no relationship at all between him as the viewer and what he's seeing. It's so foreign to him. Says that time stretches, that bodies become petrified in the structure of the ship. Then there's a guitar solo, an instrumental break. And it says, here I am laying on a bed with some kind of device over my head. Some place I've never seen, some sort of hidden secret facility where blurred shadows ask me if I remember what happened that day about a mission failure. Should I pretend that I don't know? I have the feeling it's time to go. I have to escape and tell you why I am the only one who survived. They're gonna get me. This is what happens when you know too much. And the idea of, blurred shadows chasing you down when you know too much. I mean, that's just government agents. That's G-Man right there chasing you. So I think going with that older image of knowing too much for the government to let you be alive. Very much an 80s, 90s kind of trope right there. It's interesting that it kind of died out as far as storytelling tropes go. You don't see that too often in media written by millennials, but it showed up so much in like the late 70s, but certainly the 80s and the 90s. The shadowy government man and people who knew too much and had to be kidnapped so that they couldn't tell the masses. This big anti-government stuff. But anyways, back to this track. It seems that after this event where this thing came out from underneath the surface under the water, there was all of this change. He talked about a sky engulfed in flames and abyssal hurricanes. But he also says that time stretched and bodies fused into the frame of the submarine. And then after that, he woke up in a facility with some device over his head and people asking him what happened down there. And so he chooses to escape so that he can tell everyone what happened. It's a fun story. It's very campy sci-fi. It's a little schlocky. Themes that I think have consistently fit well with metal. I mean, this even goes back to, what is it, Cryptopsy? None So Vile, which I called an extremely campy and over-the-top album, but it works. I think metal and over-the-top, camp, schlock, tongue-in-cheek kind of writing fits really well. That's not to say metal can't do serious. We have certainly heard plenty of albums, concept albums, where metal goes for a totally serious tone, lyrically and musically. But I also think that metal, being as extreme as it is, fits really well with extreme storytelling, moving into that camp, into the too ridiculous for reality kind of idea. And this is just a fun story that fits well within that. And this idea I was talking about at the beginning of feeling like there's so much weight of trudging through mud. Being in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean, technically the pressure of the water, is pushing in on the submarine itself. There is this idea of an intense pressure within this track that I think is felt through most of it. And then the end, where we have that rising escalation of tempo and anxiety, fits well with waking up somewhere you don't recognize and trying to get out. Yeah, that's a fun little song there. Next up, assuming Deezer wants to cooperate, we're going to listen to Orb Confusion. And we're going to kick it off with what we already heard a little of, is the fun back and forth on the guitars. Let's see where this track goes. The small little Almir. Oh man, I can do it. That's such a fun little idea, and the bass is just tearing it up down there. Kind of Primus a little bit in places. Swirly, mysterious sounds. What? I thought we were going to go somewhere with that lighter guitar stuff.
Where do I go? How do I escape?
What a fun chorus.
No more incredulity, no more false reality. I always knew this could be the truth. Now it's undeniable, now it's irreversible. It's not a lie, it fits so right.
It's just teetering right here, no resolution.
It's scary, it's crazy, scary, crazy. It's It's scary, it's crazy, scary, crazy.
A random symbol. Totally different instrumentation, but it reminds me a lot of track 1's finale as far as atmosphere. Well, if you didn't know, it's scary and it's crazy. I have no idea what's going on in this track. It seems incredibly tongue-in-cheek, though. I had a blast with it. It is, I think, a really good song to kind of point towards and just call it bonkers, because it kind of is. You know, maybe I overuse the term bonkers. Sure, that's a valid criticism. But I think this one fits because bonkers to me isn't just wild. Bonkers also brings in a little bit of comedic aspect. Like it's almost too wild, too crazy, too much. It's kind of interesting that the last thing I brought up, analysis wise, was how this band, particularly with End of Dormancy, it's a fun track that kind of goes to an extreme that would be too extreme for something grounded, but works well with the metal. And this song pushes past again. I think it's very easy to look at a track like this and call it cheesy. And honestly, I don't think you'd be wrong in saying that, particularly because it's subjective, but also because I kind of share that vibe too. But the difference between camp and cheese is kind of blurry, and I think it really depends on the person listening. Camp tends to be more acceptable and cheese doesn't for most people. Some people hate camp and cheese, and you know what? I don't need to associate with those people because sometimes it's fun to be ridiculous. Um, and I do feel that this is kind of cheesy in places, but it's also super campy. And I just have a blast with it, whether it was that, the finale, scary, crazy. It's, it's it's ridiculous. It's kind of dumb, but sometimes dumb can be cool. Sometimes dumb can even be smart. We haven't hit the lyrics yet. So maybe all of this does tie into something a bit larger. But also the second chorus and its use of silence, instead of holding these notes out like we did the first time, we just finish them as we would if we were singing these words. I mean, talking. When I talk to y'all, I don't ever hold out syllables when I'm talking because that's just ridiculous. That's not how we speak. Syllables have defined lengths to them. And we use silence within our speech too, sometimes for emphasis. And so instead of holding these syllables out, he just says the word and then it's done. But the guitars and drums follow suit. And instead of playing their riff, they just quit. And then there's these pockets of silence in the chorus. And then the guitar riff plays a full idea. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to do that again, but the full idea, like the first chorus. But the words get changed for na-na-nas. And it's just, why? Huh? It's playful. It is incredibly playful, and I'm having a blast with this. The lyrics, End of Dormancy, love them. Cheesy, campy, good time. This track is sonically fun. Oh, I mean, the scary, crazy part is the lyrics too. Maybe the context around those would explain that, but musically, this is just a very fun track. I mean, even from the start, playing the riff and then those tiny little palm muted guitar hits. It is a playful track. It's not trying to be cool, though I will say there is plenty of Rule of Cool stuff happening in this song, but it isn't afraid to just be. Maybe they were just feeling goofy when writing this track and they're like, let's go for it. Because Obsolete Beings isn't. I approached that one very seriously. I read it very seriously. That was a serious track to me. End of Dormancy was a serious track musically with a fun lyrical side. This one so far is fun musically. And I think it's interesting that all three of these styles can coexist on this album. None of this really feels out of place. So I will say Obsolete Beings was not a strong start to this album, given that it gave me the idea we were going to be in store for something a bit more serious. But honestly, none of these feel like they should be removed because they don't fit the vibe of the others. And that's a very difficult thing to do, to walk this line of balancing variable elements of the music and the lyrics between seriousness and playfulness. And somehow they're doing it? I don't know, dude. But it's very rare for me to laugh so much at a metal track, not out of awkwardness, but I assume with the music. And I really enjoy that, dude. We need more fun metal. Now, on the other side of things, I don't know that I have a lot to add about this track in particular. It is groovier than I think either of the other two. There's a lot of cool syncopation in here. The drum work is a bit looser than we had heard in the previous two tracks. The riffage is all over the place, though. There's a lot of riff styles in here, from more melodic driven to more texture driven to rhythmic driven, even. And the song is a bit more cohesive than End of Dormancy, which jumped between a bunch of ideas, but this one still has its own segmented concepts in it as well. I wouldn't say that every single idea in here is cut from the same cloth, but it does, much like End of Dormancy, create a unified whole in its playfulness. It's just one of those things that, yeah, some of the transitions are a bit awkward, but you just got to roll with it because they're having a fun time. You might as well have a fun time too. It'd be like getting mad at an action comedy because, yeah, there's some grounded, I don't know, car chases or gunfights or something in it. But then people are joking around, and that's not what would happen in a real gunfight. And like, you're getting mad at the film for being something that it is, instead of what you would rather it be. And when it comes to this, 3 tracks in, I think I'm ready to let my guard down a little bit and just enjoy the album and not treat it as, I mean, I'm still going to treat it as art, but not like, I feel like most of the music y'all give me is, designed to be excellent. It is, the story is phenomenal in it, or phenomenally written, or there's so much emotion, or there's a technical component to the musicality in it. And it's like, this is one of the best albums ever. I want you to listen to it. Where best is subjective. I'll throw that out there. But this feels like a System of a Down album where, yes, it is technically impressive. There are chops on display, and there is even things that they want to say here. Granted, End of Dormancy just seems to be a fun track, but Obsolete Beings was social commentary. But the vehicle they're using to deliver this is fun metal music. Not simple, but still fun. And assuming that's how the rest of the album's going to go, I'm going to try to approach it on that level. Have fun with it while not completely ignoring the more technical components of it. Let's hit some lyrics on this one. This is a fun song. Lyrically, too, the chorus points at how there's a scary thing going on that's orb confusion. As the title suggests, I don't know if this is a literal orb that's like hovering around Earth and causing chaos, but the phrase orb confusion comes up often. The rest of the track is about watching the news and seeing things happening that shouldn't be happening. Verse 1 says that weird news is leaking on this morning and that maybe I should be afraid. Verse 2 says that there's forecasts of conflict and frenetic panic. There's madness on the move. Now the pre-chorus, though, is very interesting. The first one, anyways, much like End of Dormancy, every pre-chorus and chorus is unique. Musically, not so, but lyrically, true. I like this angle. I'm a huge fan of this, of evolving the story through known musical concepts. Regardless, the first pre-chorus says, strange things occurred far out in deep space. There was an ocean disaster and a mission that failed. This is the End of Dormancy being referenced here? That's intriguing. That has my mind going. The gears are like, okay, we have one track referencing another, so where does Obsolete Beings fit into this? Now, it says there's a vortex of lies. I wonder if this is supposed to be the news, which is brought up several times. But it says, what should I do? How to escape the orb confusion. The viral news is still on and it's spreading in no time. Whole cities are on fire and there's chaotic religious breakdown. Leaders of the nations are hiding away. Maybe the entire world's fate is at stake here. How do I escape this? Now, the bridge is interesting because it brings back another idea from the End of Dormancy. It says there's no more false reality. I always knew this could be true. That was something that the protagonist of End of Dormancy also mentioned, that something sitting beneath the surface, and the existence of that was something they always knew. That seems to be something still, again, kind of popular with older media that we don't really see too much of anymore, which is this knowledge of catastrophe on the horizon. And not being able to tell anyone because you'd be crazy, but now you're vindicated. Your crazy conspiracy theories were actually true. So I find that interesting there. Then we have the guitar solo, which is a little more chaotic than some of the previous ones. And then the finale, which is just, it's scary. It's scary and crazy. Social structures are falling down. It's scary and crazy. And yeah, the simplicity of this, I think, is interesting because it probably captures the general feeling that most people would have. It's not very interesting poetically, but it is artistically valid. A way to represent how the average person would feel if a giant orb just starts hovering over your city. It's scary, dude. It's crazy. Have you seen it? It's crazy. It's scary. I'm scared. It's crazy. People already repeat themselves pretty often just in general conversation. I mean, you ever watch a stream of consciousness live stream, or even just someone who turns their camera on and talks into it? A lot of repetition in these unscripted events. I understand the irony of that. So I would wager that if your faculties are a bit overwhelmed, it'd probably be even more repetitious. I think it ends up working rather well. We're going to dive into it's pretty much the shortest track on here, called Iconspiracy. Which, conspiracy theories about icons are fairly prevalent. There's the all-seeing eye for the Illuminati. These types of ideas go way back. If you knew the symbols and knew what they meant, you'd understand the conspiracy theory. Like, iconography is huge in conspiracy theory, even up to today. And we can go all the way back to even, 616 or 666 is the number of the devil. If you ever see that, that's Satanism. Right there, you have iconography with a group that you need to look out for. So, Iconspiracy is going to be an interesting track because icons and conspiracies go together rather well. Let's dive into this. Very Cowboys from Hell. Maybe not so much anymore. That's a fun riff. Not even a minute in, you hit a solo already. Very fun accent patterns here. There's also an antagonism in this song I haven't really felt too much previously. That's two chaotic solos in under 2 minutes. Ooh, the strings are nice. Oh, dang. A little little bit of Elfman's fun mysteriousness.
Why such a coincidence? No evidence, nor sign of crime. Why
Almost like a prestigious macabre feeling.
won't survive? Witness suicide, all proof that why? And I come here, I say, why can't you see? I'm blind, but I'm foreseen.
Every single solo has only been bars though. Shorter side. Yeah. So it's still 4/4, but heavily chopped up. Interesting way to wrap that up. I think that is our least finalized track in the way that it feels like it's designed to end there. This one just kind of feels like it abruptly stops, especially since it's in the middle of a riff we have heard a few times. All the other tracks have ended with the music kind of fading into sound effects, field recording. This one wraps up in the metal. Very interesting. The first thing I do want to bring up is more illusions here. You know, we had Gustav Holst on End of Dormancy. Here, though, we certainly have some Danny Elfman style gothic sounding ideas in the middle of this track. The violin, I think, is a great addition for this moment. The vocals do a great job of pairing with this, a sort of dreariness that goes with that, but it's also not scary. I think earlier I called it like a regal macabre or something like that. And I feel that to be true. There's an elegance to it, even though it is darker. Even though to my ears, I hear this, I'm like, I should probably avoid that. That musical place probably isn't great. And maybe they're trying to sell an emotion or an atmosphere for a perspective shift. Maybe there's something being said there that we're supposed to be afraid of, which for a conspiracy, that's usually what you're being sold, is something to be aware of. But it's also, you know, it's not overwhelmingly drab or scary or eerie. It's kind of a playful eeriness caught up in this. I don't know, when I think of the ways that the violin's being played, its timbre against the grittiness of all the guitars in this track, even the lightness of the guitars here, there is I don't know if dainty is the right word. I think pizzicato would probably deliver that more, but an elegance nonetheless in this section of the track. And this sort of gothic elegance is what stands out to me in this moment. But something else I pick up in this track in places, particularly with the vocal harmonies, in fact, the dyads or the two-note chords that the vocalist likes to create harmonies with, reminds me of Dave Mustaine's vocal harmonies in Megadeth. And that actually has me segueing into something else here. I kind of picked up a little bit of this in Obsolete Beings as well, where within the first couple of minutes of the album, I was like, oh, dude, this kind of reminds me of Megadeth. And Megadeth is another thrash band that over the years kind of softened and went for more of a lighter metal or maybe even a hard rock sound. I guess Metallica too spent their years doing hard rock before returning back to their roots. But Megadeth has been a band that, to me, while not always executing the idea well, has tried to explore more sounds. I wouldn't necessarily call them a progressive band, but they have explored some more progressive, I guess structure would be their most progressive style, the most progressive aspect in their writing. In the late 2000s-ish, they started playing around with some stuff like that. Granted, interesting structure was always a part of their music anyways. You look at like Hangar 18, and that is certainly not a traditional verse, chorus, bridge chorus track. So that's always been a part of their DNA anyways. But finding lighter ways to explore their sounds is something that I just kind of associated with them at a certain point, and I'm kind of hearing that same trajectory here. There's still metal in here. There's still even thrash at moments, but I kind of have a tough time calling this a thrash metal album. And when I hear a lot of the vocal elements that remind me of Mustaine too, I just see the parallel between these two bands. And while I wasn't too stoked about Megadeth's latest work, there are a couple of post-2000s albums that I do kind of enjoy from them. And I think Voivod is doing a pretty good job on this album too. I'm sure that the thrash metal fans, maybe they're not as big of a fan of this album as some of their older work, but I'm quite enjoying this. I'm not a thrash metal fan though, so that probably checks out there. But I enjoy the melodic elements of this. I enjoy the vocal variety. I enjoy the sonic variety. I enjoy the playfulness. I think I already said that, but I bring it up again because it's a key element of what I'm enjoying here. And it just feels like, a group said, hey, we have a big storied history, we've put excellent stuff out there. Maybe it's time we just have fun. And they're kind of less worried about being the most extreme sci-fi metal band out there. And now they're just having a blast, making music that's fun to play, fun to write. I think this is another one that falls into that category, though I will say it's more serious, and no chuckles out of me this time. Maybe the lyrics will get me, maybe they're kind of campy, but this feels more in line with Obsolete Beings as far as just being a more serious track. It feels grounded, it feels rooted, there is an overwhelming drive forward that we haven't really seen too often, although I guess End of Dormancy was about being underwater. We had Pressure, of course, kind of a doomier, sludgier thing going on there. Orb Confusion had a ramping up in it, but it also was a bit on the chiller side. So kind of coming back to this drive, this intensity on I Conspiracy. Yeah. It's nice to have that back, but it also feels more serious than the previous two tracks. And I already mentioned the string section in the middle, kind of creating a little bit of sonic levity. I would say that the atmosphere is still tense on that, but it does bring the volume down a little bit. But the song is intense and driven and kind of jagged in places. The rhythmic elements in here they're wild. You may have seen me trying to bob my head to the chorus, and that thing is all over the place with its accent patterns. The first couple of bars, the next couple of bars, the third couple of bars, and the fourth couple of bars that create the full pattern, the full 8-bar pattern. They're all distinct. Every single one of them has their own groove to it. And I find that to be really interesting to listen to. It sort of ends up like a puzzle where I'm trying to memorize the order of things and groove with them. But it also creates something that feels jagged, something that's difficult to parse, which, conspiracies kind of feel that way at times. You got to know all the pieces, you got to know all the icons. If you know what this shape means and you know what that shape means, when you see them together, they mean this hybrid thing in there. And then you know that it's actually this part of this conspiracy, not this other. And it gets convoluted, right? And this is something that I think they do rather well so far, is that maybe I don't pick it up immediately in the track, but once I hit the lyrics and I see the themes there, I'm like, oh, these concepts in the music made a lot of sense to what they were singing about. And I don't remember this being the deal with Nothing Face, which felt a bit more just chaotic, progressive thrash to me. This one feels more nuanced and measured, where individual ideas are represented musically, and they pair well with the themes of the lyrics. And I can see how everything works together. It doesn't just feel like this unified thrash idea. Each track has its identity, and I think they've done a great job at keeping this album feeling diverse yet cohesive. Even after this fourth track, we're halfway through the album now, I still feel like all these songs work together. And that's always impressive for as different of sounds as all of these tracks have been so far. But for this track, I get intensity, and then I get this macabre, regal element, and then we're back to the intensity. By the end of the track, the vocalist is basically just screaming at me, so the intensity is at a peak there in the finale. Let's see where the lyrics take us on this one. Kind of intrigued because, again, as I mentioned prior to the track starting, icon conspiracy is it's an interesting topic because they're kind of tied together so much already. I'm intrigued to see where they go with this lyrically. And as is pretty much the theme for this album, 80s sci-fi schlock is here to stay. The first chorus says, "Psychotronic weapons are being used on you. All of you." It's this fear that you don't even know what's going on. The fear that you can't see the enemy to even know that an enemy is present. And this is actually showcased later on in the track too. The second bridge, pretty close to the end of the track, says, "Why would they do this?" Well, there's no coincidences. There's no evidence. No signs of a crime. No one survives. Any witnesses commit suicide. All proof is denied. The eye conspiracy you can't see. Talks about those in power doing crimes that most people don't see. And it's told that through the lens of this, the psychotronic weapons, brain waves or sound waves, some sort of waves that reach into your brain. Frequencies will make you fit in a flame. You'll become a modulated social slave. You don't even know what's happening. You just change who you are. This, I think, is actually a really interesting way to showcase what they were talking about on Obsolete Beings. And, I talked about how those lyrics were a bit, well, they're empty, they're vapid, they're very surface level, but this is the same thing about how technology controls who we are and what we do, and we don't recognize how it's manipulating us. This is an interesting way to talk about that same exact topic. Obsolete Beings and I Conspiracy do not need to be on the same album, and Obsolete Beings is, I'd say, an inferior track lyrically and about a similar track musically. It's the one that I would vote to kick off. This is a funner way to do it. A more interesting way to do it that fits their style. This over-the-top, schlocky idea of positing technology as dangerous in almost every single way. There's an exciting element to technology in their music, but it is always used for ill will. And Obsolete Beings is such a straightforward track that it doesn't feel like Voivod, not in a way that iConspiracy does. This one doesn't even specifically point towards phones in general, but the parallels work. The metaphor is there. It's a shame they decided to keep Obsolete Beings in the form that it is. It's a solid track musically, could have used some different lyrics. But I'm glad that they redeemed themselves with iConspiracy. The second time we see the chorus, it even says psychotronic weapons daily used on you. These waves that infiltrate your brain, it isn't a one-time thing. You slowly lose yourself to the messages that you don't even realize you're interpreting, the subliminal messaging, which is another phrase you don't really hear too often these days, aside from maybe, what's that phrase? It's like dark web practices or something. It's the creation of UI to guide you in a specific way that usually is against what you want. Like making the ignore button the one that's colored, and the continue on the button that is blanked out, so that, or maybe even just text at times, not even a full button, but a smaller bit of text down here. Dark patterns, that's what it is. Dark patterns of interface design. Technically subliminal messaging, but we just don't use that phrase anymore. Still ways of guiding someone's hand or mind through an encounter without them knowing it. But again, it's another one of those phrases that's a bit older, but it feels like it matches the energy of Voivod perfectly. Talks about they control our dreams while we sleep, forming and reforming our feelings, that our true self is what follows, like, or our true self goes, and then we follow like sheep into a life where someone else leads. Yeah. Dude, it's such a better version of Obsolete Beings. I'm just going to leave it there because I am repeating myself over and over on this. I'm really driving it home. Obsolete Beings does not need to be on this album. Let's hit Event Horizon. No, Spherical Perspective. Let's see what's going on here. You know, talking about interfering with your dreams, this is very dream-like here, but maybe more like a nightmare with the general metallic humming that's existing everywhere. Maybe we are inside of the orb. It's the orb confusion. It's scary. I like that bass lick. General feeling of descent at the end of the phrase.
Then my soul starts to fly far from the chaos of this life. All these goals
just a very present ride cymbal over there. So Orb Confusion also had the back and forth, and here we have Spherical Perspective doing the back and forth. Start shift in time. I think we're accelerating too.
No one is listening. You can't be seen. And the sun refuses to shine. Why should I be if this life has no meaning? I'm traveling far away out there. Rudest sky deep in my head. I escape. Feelings get hurt, and no care is given. Such a lonely star, in darkness confined.
What? So that's a 7.
I'm waving goodbye.
So even the guitar solo I felt was kind of moving into the realm of paranoia, but this might actually be insomnia or something. Although maybe the whole concept of spherical perspective would be insanity driving or a mere human.
For so long, been up there.
That feeling of drifting here. good, dude. Maybe that would. You done? Maybe that whole finale would make more sense on repeat listens, but I I don't even know what to think of it. It's just comical, entirely unexpected in a way that almost becomes absurd. I will say for this track, a majority of it begins to feel more like it's a character being driven insane. There were certainly some harmonic ideas at the beginning that's tied into this. I mean, first of all, we do have the connection to Orb Confusion with the heavy pan guitars alternating, just like we saw at the beginning of Orb Confusion. Um, and so I have to assume that this is tied into that because an orb is a spherical object. We have that parallel in the music, we have the parallel in the title. But so much of this feels like being lost, even from the beginning. This is the first track to be in 3. That threw me off for a second. I figured halfway into this album, it's all been 4/4. That doesn't mean they won't deviate from that, but most bands, when you hit the halfway point, you've heard a majority of what they're going to throw into the album. You know, there might be a ballad later where we get a sonic deviation. Maybe the ballad will be in 3. But generally speaking, halfway through an album, you should have a pretty strong gist of what the album is about. And here we shift to 3. So we have that as an odd idea. We have the callback, which is already intriguing. And then we have this general darkness in the track from the guitars. This has been fairly prevalent. This has been a metal album. The guitars have bite to them. None of this has been overly joyous as far as harmony goes. But this one I feel has a darkness that implies like a lack of light, a lack of information. And through that, we go through a couple of sections that are ever twisting. Like it's kind of tough to gauge what the song is doing, where it's going, what it's trying to set up. It sort of just is in a lot of places. And you just have to go with the turn when it happens. Sort of like if you're blindfolded in a car, you can't anticipate when there's going to be a sharp turn to kind of lean into it. You just wait until the car's moving and you've got to react afterwards, after your body's been thrown a little bit. And that's what this feels like. I can't ever predict where it's going. And then eventually, I guess we were about 3 minutes in, we hit the guitar solo and it felt kind of paranoid. Not just unsure of its surroundings, but questioning everything too, feeling like they're in a place of constant danger where they have to look over their shoulder. From here, we entered into a section where the guitar parts melodically were just kind of wild. I couldn't really grasp what the melodies themselves were saying. They felt a bit obtuse in their directionality, in their note choice, the interval jumps. But we also shifted to a 7-beat phrase. Not one that's evenly divided across the midpoint either. It's one that feels like it should be an 8-beat phrase, 2 bars of 4/4, incredibly standard, but the last beat is cut off, so you end up lurching into the repetition. You jump back to the beginning of the riff half of a beat earlier than you expected. It is a jarring transition. And to wrap this track up, after moving through this descent, through uncertainty, into paranoia, into insanity almost, there's just a lack of self, a destruction of self, as if this person is falling through an empty void. No bottom in sight. The top there's just a light way, way above, but it's just darkness around you. Just black. Not even the idea of light seeps anywhere. That circle up there is so far away, that little bit of light, that it's not even coloring the darkness around you. The light rays themselves have ceased to reach where you are. You can just vaguely see that little circle up there. And it's this depersonalization as there's this heavy reverb on the vocals and just a general empty feeling throughout this track that leads into the emptiness of the finale. Lots of space with an occasional hit of a drum that just echoes, as if it's the only thing here. Based off of some of these sci-fi tropes here, I am going to assume that the orb that caused so much confusion, that was scary, oh man, and crazy back in track 3, maybe a person, a protagonist of this track. I don't think this is all told from one perspective. I think we're just kind of jumping around between a lot of things. But somebody has been scooped up into the orb, and this is their perspective there. Also, I find this really interesting that the end of Dormancy talks about this alien stuff rising up from under the water. Orb confusion is an orb, just like flying through the sky, that confuses people. News articles, there's even a reference directly to this failed submarine mission. Is that what it was? So we have direct connection there. The person from End of Dormancy escapes, presumably the black site that they are being held in. Maybe they've come out. Maybe iConspiracy was all about telling the masses. He seems crazy. Maybe, well, there's an orb flying around. Maybe he doesn't seem too crazy. But he's trying to tell everybody, look, this is what's going on. They're controlling you. And then we shift back to the orb thing. This all feels connected. Another reason I'm pointing towards obsolete beings, it doesn't feel like it fits in here. Although maybe it's a bit like a preface. Maybe like Rod Serling. Sterling? Who's the Twilight Zone? Is it Rod? It's Rod Serling, right? Anyways, like how he introduces an episode talking about vague ideas before getting into the story itself. Obsolete beings is the very clear, obvious thing being spoken about, and then we get into the story that has that clear idea as a metaphor within it. If we continue to move into this and push through and find that looking at screens is what caused all of this, I will forgive Obsolete Beings for its simplicity. But it still feels so disjointed from the other tracks that we've explored, and I expect Spherical Perspective to work within this narrative that they're crafting here. But that's what I get. Someone pulled into this orb, lost, confused, and then just going insane from what they see inside of it, the perspective of being in a spherical world. I mean, humans, we see in front of us. We don't have a super wide field of vision, but imagine how mind-boggling, maybe even mind-breaking it would be to wake up one morning and have 360 perspective. Just to see everything around us. It might be cool for a moment, but our brains, or at least the older you are, they're less designed for that, and they're less flexible to adapt to stuff like that too. So I bet that would be, I mean, that could probably drive someone insane. Just to have this new perspective on the world at large. I do want to touch on the bass. I feel like I've been ignoring talking about it recently simply because I don't think it's adding too much to the conversation. It is in conversation with the instrumentation in here and gets scooped up into all of the conversation about harmony and riffage, but I haven't pointed it out yet. I do want to take a moment to do that. I think specifically on iConspiracy and Spherical Perspective, we have had some really strong moments of kind of scooping out the middle of the track to say, hey, look, the bass is here, listen to it. And the bass has been soloed and showcased on both of these tracks, though it is quite present in the mix and you can hear some cool licks all throughout this album. But certainly in these last two, it's impossible to ignore it. And it is doing some great stuff. It's not just pedal tone. And I know that's like, it feels like, dude, that's such a low bar, but there's so much metal music out there where the bass just plays the guitar lines like doon 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 doon. And here the bassist is complimenting everyone. Yeah, sometimes they lock in. The drums, the guitars, the bass, sometimes they all have a unified approach, but also maybe even more frequently than that, the bassist is doing their own thing as counterpoint, as harmonic shaping, holding down the low end without just locking into a single note, being a secondary lead instrument. The bass is just phenomenal. And it has a great tone here, too. It's a little, I don't want to use the word muddy, but it is wider than I think I would normally enjoy because I do feel like on some of the faster ideas, the notes kind of blend together in a way. I would like just a little bit more space between them. But I think for what they're going for, it generally works and it retains that punchiness and size that this style of music really likes to focus on. Again, it's about the extremity of the riffs, the extremity about the emotions, the extremity of the lyrics, the extremity of the atmosphere, and the bass being a bit larger ties into that. And it's one of those things where it's, aesthetic over precision. And in this case, it absolutely works. It drives home the ideas that they're aiming for. And it sounds great, dude. Like, this is another album where I'm just thinking, like, dude, I'd love to learn some of the bass lines because they are legitimately cool, even just in and of themselves. Just cool licks. But then you listen to the way that they're bouncing off of or around what the guitarist is doing. You're getting that cool counterpoint in there. And it's just real slick. It really is. And the bassist isn't, is not taking a day off, not taking a track off. They're just consistently energetic and moving throughout all of what we've heard so far. I'm a big fan of this. Let's see, is there anything else in here I wanted to bring up? We had another guitar solo in here. This one was wilder than I think any we've heard, but it was during what I interpret as like the Insanity descent section towards the end of the track. Yeah, I think that's going to be about it then. I said some lyrics. So this track isn't about someone losing their mind inside of the orb of confusion. Instead, I don't know what it's about. At least not within the perspective of the emotions I felt, the story that I felt was told in the music. What it is about is someone who feels disconnected from the world, but still trying to perceive the entirety of it, to have an open mind without horizons. The opening says, "This nice spot that I found connected to the ground. I'm staying here all night, staring at the open sky." This feeling of just trying to be connected to everything. Now, comically, the next line is staring at the open sky till my eyes bleed. It can't stay too grounded, can it? The chorus states that their soul starts to fly away from the chaos of life. It says all of these calls, he hears all of humanity screaming unheard because the world is a lost cause. The second verse talks about going into a forest away from the city. He feels that he's just not connected anymore to that side. He says, I'm going into the forest to meet my peers who are no longer here, going for that spiritual connection of his past. He says that he's been out here so long, but he's strong in despair. He'll get lost until his bones turn to dust. Then he says, if this life has no meaning, then I'm going to travel far away from here through the sky that is deep in my mind and escape. If this plane of existence lacks meaning, I will find another that has. We end the track. Look up at the sky, see me passing by. I'm waving goodbye, enjoying the ride. It's about finding a lack of connection with the way things are, with the way humanity is, and trying to find some sort of purpose. The city life, the hustle bustle, the grinding of work to pay bills, he doesn't find purpose in that. Yeah, I'm not too sure about the musical side. This feels very pensive and enlightening. That's not what I got from the music at all. Although I will say that the end of the track felt depersonalized, and I took that to mean insanity, but it could be the abstraction of the soul from the shell. I think that does end up working rather well, even if I think the build up to it, I kind of get a disconnect emotionally being between what's being told to me musically and the story that's being described to me lyrically. Next up, we have Event Horizon. Let's see what's going on here. So we have another 7 here.
Water keeps on rising, and there's no solution. Miles of ice fade away, water correlation. Globalist refugees in a mass mutation. Our own enemies are lost in misconception.
Nice 3. It's also kind of swirly though. I think because of that. The vocal melodies don't really make much sense either. A lot of this is obtuse, creating more of that paranoia feeling from the previous track.
Chip implanted under your skin. Where you are, what you do, they sure know everything. No privacy, no dignity, no self whatsoever. This entity, identity, you're a barcode number. Does it feel right? We can't see future is ruling your life.
Those vocal harmonies again.
It's a new phase. We have to face irreversible process is engaged.
I do like this drum pattern though. The syncopation is just enough to make it feel more driven despite not really much of a tempo change.
This goes way beyond, way beyond, way beyond. Expectations way beyond, way beyond, way beyond. Any fiction way beyond.
Stomp entered the studio. I feel like they do like hyper groups so rarely that it just feels so good when they entered it. Is that an organ? Electric organ? Yeah, I think so. A half-step increase. Again. And again. I'll tell you, man, these outros are not really doing it for me. They either just stop, like what we saw on iConspiracy, I believe. This one just kind of faded out on a last note, not a real strong sense of finale there. Just let's play the riff until we stop playing the riff. And the other tracks have their awkward idea. Spherical Perspective had the drum bit. The first three tracks had their atmospheric movements. I would wager that some of this probably works better without the stops between tracks. That's the nature of the beast of doing this. Listening to the whole hour-long album and then commenting on it just wouldn't be quite as effective. That's just how reactions go, I suppose. But yeah, I haven't really felt a satisfying finale yet. It's like the songs are good. Parts of the songs are great. Subjectively, thrash isn't really my cup of tea. There's some really great sections in here. Event Horizon had that super groove moment that I'm a sucker for that, dude. That works so good. But it's all solid 6 out of 10. It's like good. It's good stuff in here. The riffs are solid if you're a riff guy, a riff gal, riff person. If you're a riff lover, this has some strong riffs in it. I'm not usually here for riffs too often. But it's a solid album. I'm not disliking my time with this. I find it enjoyable to listen to, and I think it's going to be good for a one-time listen. I don't know if I'm going to come back to too much of this. But I'm enjoying myself with it. And that's not always a given with these with these album reviews. But the songs are great. And then they just end. I haven't really heard an ending. I'm like, dude, that was a solid way to wrap that up. And I don't know if this is just them. I don't remember commenting too much about the endings in Nothing Face. Maybe I also had the criticism back then. Maybe this is just their style. None of these endings have really hit. None of them feel like they escalate into something great. None of them feel like they have resolution or finality. And I don't really think we've heard too much of a final, 4 to 8 bar idea that pushes towards finality or resolution. It's usually just play the riff until we're done with the song, and then that's it. The riff's job, pretty much through this entire album, is cyclicality. Every single riff is designed to loop back in on itself. Cyclicality is sort of the opposite of finality. If it's designed to continue infinitely, it's not designed to stop. And so having a riff that is designed to cycle back in on itself, be the final idea in most of these tracks, is what makes them feel like they're lacking that finality, that permanence, that ending. It's what makes them feel unfulfilling. If you have felt that, that would be why, though. And that's what I'm feeling throughout most of this album. There was one track, I think, that ended decently enough. I don't remember which one it was, but then it had an extended thing on it, some sort of sounds, or I don't think it was the drum part of Spherical Perspective. I think it was one of the first 3 tracks. I'm just like, you finally wrote a good ending and then you added some stuff to it. Why? The endings haven't really made much sense to me. The added endings. So maybe that's another thing too. Maybe if I understood them more within the context of the artistry and the vision, maybe I'd feel a little bit more positive about those as wrapping up ideas, outro ideas for tracks. But this one is just another one, just kind of quits, man. Yeah, continuing on with a lot of the same topics I've touched on so far. Solid riffs throughout. We have an awkward, I think, I'm not 100% certain, a 7-beat phrase to kick this song off that we return to a couple of times, but a majority of this is in 3/4. We do hit a 4/4 with some super groovy ideas in the middle of this track. It just feels right. That part hits. But everything else, man, we got some more of these sort of awkward, spirally, loopy kind of guitar riffs that harmonically don't really go anywhere, but they also don't point towards anything harmonically, like emotionally either. They feel like walking in circles, being somewhere that you don't recognize, that you're not familiar with. There's a general feeling of being lost throughout most of these tracks in the middle here. And this continues that trend. I think this is interesting because I didn't really bring this up too much at the beginning of the album, but it's certainly been a dominant harmonic element to their writing for this album as a whole. And this track just continues on with that. The bass embellishes it, and the drums, they're locked in, dude. The drummer here is solid. I really think that's the best compliment I can give them. There are some cool fills in here, and there have been 1 or 2 kind of interesting, like uniquely interesting drum patterns. But for the most part, the drummer's just a human metronome, dude. The precision, the temporal control, everything. The drummer just locks everything down, and extremely consistent through this entire album, and just being a force of momentum. The drum part in all these tracks typically keep the beat and keep things moving forward. It's never unbusy. It's never too simple. This actually checks out. Thrash metal isn't a genre I typically think about for complex drumming. To me, thrash metal is more about endurance, about playing at the speeds, the tempos that they do, and being as consistent for an entire hour-long set or whatever your concert is, and just having the muscular endurance to play that quickly for that long. That's where the technicality comes in. But it's usually not in the composition itself. And that's not, that's not a knock against thrash metal. And I'm sure there's progressive thrash metal out there that does more complex stuff. But it's just not what I think of when it comes to thrash metal. And so this track feels like, well, what if a thrash drummer known for consistency over technical prowess slowed down a little bit? Well, you have that super consistency, you have the precision, you don't really get all of that technical side of things. But I do love when the drummer does dive into something a little more interesting. And I do think that that groovy section is really all about the drummer there. Is it a simple idea? Sure, but it's syncopated in a way that only the drummer could have brought to the table. If the guitars had done that, it would have lacked the punch that makes it so groovy, that makes you just want to move to it, to bob your head, to move your body. I'm glad that whoever writes this, maybe it's a group project where the drummer writes his own parts, the guitarist writes their own parts, or maybe they have a core composer. Whoever wrote this and caught on to that, like, nah, dude, the drummer's got to get syncopated here. Yeah, excellent, excellent read on that. Absolutely what that section needed, and it's so good because of it. Otherwise, though, not much of this really stands out to me, like separate from the rest. I had mentioned that the first three tracks kind of all have their own feeling, but aside from some time signature changes in these last couple of tracks, they all kind of have the same vibe. Again, it's this paranoia, it's this feeling of lost, not really knowing your surroundings. I kind of introduced Obsolete Beings as having this like intangibly psychedelic sci-fi thing going on. And I think that they have been working within that realm, but these last few tracks have really stuck to the psychedelic side of things. And they don't really feel as sci-fi oriented anymore. It isn't quite as heavy as End of Dormancy was, which makes sense because that was exploring a submarine. But iConspiracy, Spherical Perspective, and Event Horizon, they're all kind of bleeding together for me. I can remember specific riffs from the first three, but not really so much of the last three that we've listened to. For better or worse, sometimes albums being homogenized are a great thing. It adds to the experience and makes it feel like this lengthy journey. Other times, though, it can create a sense of boredom as there isn't a lot of contrast going on. I will say that the tempo changes, the time signature changes, the vocal variety, they're still adding. And if you're a riff person, maybe you're paying more attention to specific riffs than I am. I'm mostly pulling emotional energy out of riffs and any interesting techniques that I might be hearing. I'm not really worrying too much about, remembering the riff or having it be something I can hum back, the memorability of it. You give me a few listens, and sure, I think Voivod writes some fantastic riffs, and yeah, I do think they're catchy for the most part. If I heard this album a few times, I'm sure I'd be humming a few of the riffs alongside the guitars while I'm listening to them. But as far as a first time listen, that kind of stuff isn't really sticking out to me. And it's sort of like Bolt Thrower, where if I listen to an individual song for a reaction, I will absolutely point out the riffage, the riff writing, and maybe even hum one back. But if I listen to a whole album of Bolt Thrower, it's certainly going to become more homogenized and molded together in my memory, as the riffs themselves will be less important to me in the context of the whole. And I think that's what's happening here. And that might be why I was more interested in the riffs specifically on Obsolete Beings, but as I've gotten to know their riff style and the blueprint to them, they've just kind of become very similar as we've gotten deeper into this album. Let's hit some lyrics on this one. We'll head into the penultimate and shortest track on this album. All right. This track is about issues on the horizon. No relationship to the title there, but ones that can be perceived and nothing is done about them. The opening verse talks about water levels rising, the ice caps melting. Says there's a correlation, but who cares about that? Says that our own enemies are lost in misconceptions. So we have global warming or climate control in discussion here. The second verse is interesting, though. This is where we kind of move away from the social commentary as a leading factor and put it beneath the surface as we explore something for this specific story, the fiction that can exist here to speak about real life. there is a virus in the ice caps. And as the heat melts them, this bacteria spreads out everywhere. It says because of that, we have no idea where we will be sleeping at night. We just know that the earth will never be the same. But it's too late. It's an irreversible process. It's already begun. And we, humanity, is to blame. Everything that's happening is way beyond speculation. That chorus cracks me up. It's the repetition, man. It's dude, that's good. From here, we do another sort of heightened element. We do bring up the microchip, which seems to be a conspiracy theory that many older generation are likely to peddle. It says since birth, the microchip is implanted in your skin. It knows where you are and what you do and everything that you know. There's no privacy, no dignity, no self even. This is your entity, your identity. You're just a barcode. Now, the whole microchip thing is rather comical if you might be of the younger generation who hasn't really, I don't know, pieced together the metaphor. Microchips are certainly something that I see too often on older people's Facebook accounts talking about microchips and people. I don't know, dude, it cracks me up. It's so dumb because we all carry a device that knows exactly who we are and communicates it to the people above us. They know what we are, they know what we want, and they can tell us what to do. So once again, just like iConspiracy and Obsolete Beings, we have an idea here about how technology controls us using this kind of cliche idea of the microchip, but still nonetheless, still accurately talking about modern day, the lack of privacy as technology continues to grow. And it says, what a shame that in the name of progress, we fall in disgrace. I feel that way. I don't talk about this a lot, but I'm a very tech-oriented person. I grew up around a lot of technology. My dad built and fixed computers. There's an entire room of just parts in my house growing up. And I've always loved new technologies. And I remember back in the day, the whole idea of AI assistants and, well, back then we called them personal digital assistants or PDAs. But the idea of having your phone be something you can talk to, and by a simple voice command, it will do what it needs to. Sort of like in Star Trek, the Enterprise, where you tell the ship what you need to do and it does it. The whole idea of a smart home was incredibly cool for me. I find that we have fallen in such a disgrace as this future that was very cool is pretty much everything I rebel against now because of all of the privacy deteriorating elements that come with that. There are certainly ways to do it on your own. It requires skills to be able to create something that will understand your voice and then fire off stuff. And these aren't skills that the average person has. A lot of it is coding, or at least pseudocode, if you're using an already existing program. And like I still kind of do some stuff in that area with my technology, but I've kind of given up on this idea of stepping into the future because the future is destruction of privacy. And I feel that in the name of progress, we fall in disgrace. There's a lot of days I think back to the futuristic view of the 1950s with robotic homes and all that, and this almost naive in comparison to today understanding of how robots would exist in the home to do stuff for us. We certainly have refrigerators that will scan items as you put them in and make a list of the things you need to buy because you've pulled the item out. Very futuristic, very much removing that workload, or I guess mental workload, from the person in the house. Unfortunately, what you buy and what you put into the refrigerator is also sent off to some company and sold to some data broker and added to some shadow profile for you. So it's just so it makes me angry. It really does. The sheer greed that got in the way of progress. Anyways, that's my little rant here. We come to the penultimate stanza here. It says the human nature always needs more power, only cares for now, doesn't look any further. Always about the short-term gains. The power, at least today, is generally money. You can see that in a lot of companies trying to make this quarter look great, even if it destroys next quarter's portfolio. But who cares? It looks good today. Whatever corners you need to cut, whatever destruction you need to do, as long as this quarter looks good for the shareholders. It says these human failures are born to overtake. We steal from our brothers and repeat the same mistakes. Both of these two stanzas are followed up by the phrase again, 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 again. This isn't something that has just happened once. It isn't a small little recurring rhyme. This is a pattern throughout history. How greed and power will have us betray our closest people. I don't think that it is a mistake they use the phrase steal from brothers, not neighbors, not friends, family, not just any family, brothers, someone from, generally speaking, the same generation as you. Pickpocketing the person standing right next to you. It wraps up and says, tomorrow's gray, a doomy, dark landscape, evil eyes, ravaged face, dead zone signs. The tensions grow, the world's divided, the call for war and decisions are made. It does say that we burst into space without a trace. I think people see space as a savior or the destruction of this planet, but honestly, humanity is just going to destroy wherever they end up, unfortunately. But it does say that this planet is doomed, not just in our destruction of it, but the destruction of ourselves. As more and more power is sucked up by the few, it's left more room for anger and strife and poor decision-making due to stress. Call for war on every level. We haven't had a lot of optimistic albums lately. Did we do Manic Street Preachers last week? Or yeah, I think it was last week, because 2 weeks ago was Genesis, Foxtrot, which that also had its own pessimistic take on greed too. Yeah. Humans are capable of so much greatness. It's a shame that a few with terrible inclinations tend to bring the entire race down. The penultimate track here, also the shortest, Always Moving. More of that dangerous uncertainty. What is this? Like an Evo on the guitar, on the bass maybe? Very psychedelic, very trippy with the high reverb and delay. this isn't 4/4, but there's not really a lot of signposting for it. It's just a very loose section on this album. So much tension. What a wild direction for this.
Laser souls, crack the malls, distance falls, death illuminates. Neutralized, sterilized, purified, energy remains. In the cross, from the lost, all across, life regenerates.
Rare moments of optimism on this album. Very 90s space rock.
In the maze of your own path, through the gate, in your act, you are so what it takes. Fast in the maze of your own path, through the gate. Fast in your act, you are so fast. What it takes.
I don't really have a lot to say here. Honestly, I would probably move on to the next track, given that my thoughts could probably be wrapped up fairly quickly here. But the next track is 12.5 minutes, and I will probably not remember much about Always Moving. So let's just take a moment here to talk about this real quick. The beginning is driven. The drums come in, the guitars come in. I'm like, okay, always moving, high intensity movement, pretty solid synergy right here. As soon as the vocals came in, though, it kind of lacked momentum. I don't really know what brought this on. I think the drums kind of backed off a little bit with its intensity because we were getting like snare every single beat, and we backed off that a little bit. And it just felt like we weren't driving anymore. Also, somewhere in, I think it was the chorus in this section, the entire song just chills out. we enter into a very psychedelic sound. There's lots of layers of reverb and delay on the vocals. The guitars have these larger harmonic ideas. It's not really about the riffs so much as the atmosphere in this section. And it's just very loose. So loose, in fact, that there's not really a lot of rhythmic information here either. I counted out an idea that was 16 beats, so I think we are in 4/4 there. And there is a general idea of where one is in the phrase, but finding one for each individual bar in that phrase isn't as easy. It's a very loose section, rhythmically, harmonically, even, I mean, the tempo of it, not tempo, the temporal, the time elements of it is just loose because of all the delay and reverb. It's kind of tough to find where the voice is because it just kind of continues to exist after it's been said. It definitely feels psychedelic, very much like 60s psychedelic rock. And I think it's a cool sound. We haven't really heard much of it. We've heard adjacent stuff to it. I've brought up psychedelic rock in this album already, but here it is just absolutely wearing that inspiration on its sleeve. Feels so much like the music of the 60s with a modern production to it. And that's pretty cool. We have a solo in here that feels optimistic. That's a word I haven't used, and I think it's funny coming off of Event Horizon talking about how much this album has given up. It doesn't have a strong optimistic view of the future. But here, the guitar is uplifting and drives upwards in pitch, and by the end of it, it lands on a pretty solid harmony with the rest of the instrumentation. It sounds like a bright tomorrow. Almost the exact opposite words that wrapped up Event Horizon. But as soon as that's over, then we are always moving. We got some pretty standard thrash in the final 30 seconds of this track that drive us to the end of this song. So psychedelic floatiness, followed by optimism, followed by a return to that death spiral, an acceleration towards a point. I'd say this is probably the weakest track of the album for me musically. I don't know if that's because it's on the shorter side and it gets in, does its thing, and gets out. It's not quite as exploratory. Or I think there's also just bits of the writing in here where the guitars just kind of lock into a couple of notes, and I don't find it to be too interesting. And the vocals aren't always providing melody on top of that. And a couple places in here just kind of felt stagnant. Like there should have been one more idea present and they just didn't put it in there. Now maybe that feeling of stagnancy is supposed to be in here, but for a track called Always Moving, that seems to be counterproductive. And that's about all I need to say on this one. Let's hit some lyrics and then dive into the big epic conclusion. All right, I found this interesting. The end of Event Horizon mentioned going into space. The opening line of this is "in my inner galaxy." Now, this does seem to be going to a spiritual sort of space, escaping from this planet on another plane of existence more so than in another physical place. But I think that this concept is consistent through the metaphor as well, of trying to find purpose and connection in a way that is stripped away from us, or is, as we're told, to deviate from in our daily lives. It says, "As we speak, the end is near. You're farther than you appear, gaining seconds in your time, but always moving." The second verse talks about meeting in your final days. "A spinning core disintegrates in raging speed, and soon we will collide as we both live on layers of chrome, side by side but separately." I've been trying to piece this together. I think as far as the surface level read on this album, I've been pretty consistent with understanding both what they're saying and what they're saying, the main story and their social commentary beneath that. Here, though, I'm lost on both accounts. I'm not sure what it means to live side by side on layers of chrome, separate but side by side, but that they'll also soon collide because they're always moving. There's a stanza that says, dragged by the sun, steady on the run, caught in a race, unlock a new space, purged in course, driven by the force, time is our mind, what we left behind. And it's another thing where I have the pieces. I just can't arrange them into a picture that makes sense to me. The section before the guitar solo only ends up confusing me more. In a coil, ride the void, past destroyed, spirit interface, laser souls, crack the molds, distance folds, depth illuminates, neutralized, sterilized, purified, energy remains in the crust from the lost, all across life regenerates. What I get out of those final lines is the cycle or circle of life. That when you die, your energy and nutrients and whatever else goes into the soil and it creates food for other beings. And anything that isn't decomposed is consumed by other animals too. And it's like your death feeds rebirth, it feeds life. So I get that. Energy remains in the crust and life regenerates. So we're talking about a rebirth of the earth after we've destroyed it. But where does the rest of this track fit in? I don't know. The chorus and what we end on is fast. In the maze of your own, past, through the gate. Fast, in your act, you have shown what it takes. I have no idea. And this sucks, dude, to have a decent enough grasp on an album and coming up to the penultimate track, which I'm going to assume is necessary to understand the ending, and just running into a wall and not being able to get through this hurdle. I have stared at these lyrics for too long, and it's just, they're not making any sense to me. And I kind of hate that. And here it is. The final track today, Sonic Mycelium. If I remember correctly, mycelium has to do with fungus, but beyond that, I couldn't tell you. This isn't the first time we've had sci-fi fungus, though? Oh, no, you know what? That wasn't Voivod. It was Parias? Maybe? We've done so much like sci-fi progressive metal stuff. It's all kind of blurring together. Anyways, Sonic Mycelium. Let's see what's going on with this. This passing of the baton, I've used that phrase for this type of writing before. Nice to see this return.
I'm staying here all night, staring at the open sky till my
Yeah, very awkward. It is 4/4, but it's just a wild accent pattern. This is driven, you got that momentum going. Chimes. Okay, the more I listen to this riff, the more fun it gets. Dude, there's so much happening so quickly too. But it felt like we brought back that idea from the planets.
You'll never know. We'll never know. The dream is gone. The time is done.
A little bit of Phrygian thrown in there. Wild vocal layering.
From the secret vault of holy power, magnify a field lasting tower.
Okay. Beautiful melody here. Another strange accent pattern. This riff sounds familiar, but I can't place it. Very noisy. Interesting transition.
In my hand.
Love that bass line right there. Always Moving? The title of the last track?
Rolling down in paradise. Cast away.
Got them panic chords going.
I want a world that isn't yours. You might forget to live your life. This is the end of dormancy.
That riff also sounds familiar.
Receive it underneath. Millions of years of dormancy. This thing won't change.
Oh, that's from the beginning of this track. Way Beyond. That's from Event Horizon? That fucking cracked me up back then. It still cracks me up. There's a new vocal part behind it though. Are they just pulling lyrics back from a lot of the previous tracks? I don't think it's paired with the music though. A lot of this music sounds new. But there are sections that feel familiar though. Cello, viola, violin. 2 violins, so we have a string quartet. 3? No, just 2. Lots of cool slippage going on. like a little plucked, muted string. I want to like that finale because I feel like it's unique at the very least, but I just don't get it. It doesn't mean anything to me. I did like the strings though. I thought that was a really nice way to bring some of these ideas that were sort of underneath the surface of the metal stuff in that final section. And it's just kind of embellishing on some of it, but also creating a duality. The metal instruments are really pushing towards this aggression, this big, massive ending. Then there's these delicate strings, though, and I even touched on. I was like, oh, there's this beautiful violin coming in over here. It was actually quite more meticulous than I expected. As the band begins to fade out, and we just have the string quartet left over, and it's not just a violin. There's 4 instruments here. And I love what we have out of this is that there's a beauty to all of it, but there's also a tension. And that tension just continues to rise until the beauty is gone, until you can't ignore it anymore because it's the dominating sound. And we just fade out on all of this dissonant harmony, almost as if they're alarms that were slowly, well, no, that doesn't, I was going to relate it to like waking up to an alarm and it's slowly fading in, but this actually fades that alarm out. So I don't have a good metaphor for that, but it does fade it out into just this muted picking. I don't know the right onomatopoeia for it. It's this very light sound of a muted string. There's not a lot of vibration allowed for it, but enough to get an initial tone out of it. And just bink, 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 just kind of, well, oscillating between 2 notes again. That's kind of how we started the album. I don't know. The metal peak into the string quartet, though, was phenomenal. And maybe that fading into the outro is good too, but it just, without someone else's help, I don't understand it. And so I don't know how to feel about it. In fact, right now I'm just kind of ambivalent to it. It was some sound in the last 30 seconds, but I couldn't connect with it. It didn't mean anything, Prior to that, though, this song is a whirlwind. And granted, it is 12 and a half minutes, and I suppose if we take off the non-metal final 2.5 minutes or so, we have 10 minutes of just metal music, all sorts of different metal music. We have tense, we have optimistic, we have depressive, we have psychedelic, we have driven, we have laid back, we have spacious, we have claustrophobic. It's just like every, 16 bars maybe, we are just flipping between ideas. It is rapid fire, dude. By the time I started to even understand what one section was doing, we were gone, out of it, doing something else. For that effect, I don't really have an overarching emotional narrative to all of this that I can say, oh, all these sections created this narrative in my mind. The only thing I got out of this was a frenzy. Like going to a museum, but being shoved through constantly. You can get glimpses of something, but you don't actually get to sit with any pieces. You're constantly being moved to the next exhibit and the next exhibit. You've seen it for a second. Let's get going. That's what this track feels like to me. It's frantic. It's chaotic and it feels like I just don't have a moment to breathe at all. The vocal styles are changing, the guitar tones are changing, the riffs are altering, the speed is shifting. Sometimes it's expansive, like those moments where we're kind of going for that spiritual angle. And it feels like there's so much room to explore. And then someone just grabs my leg, pulls me out of the sky, and takes this into like a car that's going 70 miles an hour. And I'm like, wow, dude, this is really fast. And then they're like, all right, time to get out. Now we're on a pogo stick. Let's do this for a little bit. And it's just so chaotic, dude. But I think the wildest thing is that within all this chaos, it didn't seem novel. That is to say that these sections aren't totally unique. Now, the intro riff comes back a couple of times, but there are a few guitar riffs in here and drum patterns that I think came from previous songs. I couldn't point to any of them specifically, but they just felt familiar enough. Now, granted, I also gaslit myself into thinking that these were familiar, and then the intro riff came up, and I was like, yeah, that's familiar too. And it took me a second to realize, oh, snap, that came from this song. So maybe that feeling of familiarity doesn't necessarily mean we are directly taking or taking lines from previous tracks or writing riffs inspired by previous tracks. But there is a feeling of, I've been here before on some of these riffs. And this was actually something I felt before I even picked up on the fact that some of these lyrics are from previous tracks. The phrase "always moving" popped up, and then there was the "way beyond" line from Event Horizon. We had the crazy scary from Orb Confusion in here. And I don't know how all of this works into it either. It's a smorgasbord, a frenzy of at the very least, lyrical ideas from across the album all smashed together. I'm still not sure about the music. Like I said, there are some sections that feel familiar, but for the most part, I think a lot of this felt fresh to me. And at the very least, when I think it was the Way Beyond section came in. No, it was the scary, whatever the other word was. When that section came in from Orb Confusion, there was another vocal part kind of holding out these long notes in the background that I don't remember from Orb Confusion. And that makes me think that more of the composition is fresh. That we're taking piecemeal the lyrics from the album, but writing a new song for them to exist within, recontextualizing these lines. At least that's my perspective on it here. But if we are taking lyrics piecemeal from the album, even if the licks, the riffs themselves aren't taken and reinterpreted, at least the vibes are. The drive, the laid back, the weight, the claustrophobia, the expansive, the spiritual versus the grounded. All of these are atmospheres and vibes that we have experienced on this album. I wonder then if this is supposed to be a track of experiencing our past of some sort, simply because Event Horizon was about the world ending. Some of us went off into space, or at least looked to space as an escape. Always Moving was about going into a mental space of elevating oneself's consciousness. Maybe the Earth does destroy humanity, or maybe we destroy the Earth. These are the final moments as we look back into our past, and musically and lyrically, we dive back into the album. I'm not 100% confident in that read, but it's the best I have right here, trying to understand what this smorgasbord of sounds was and what it all means. Let me read some lyrics for Sonic Mycelium. I should probably look up the word mycelium as well. That might help a little. And we'll see where this takes us as I try to understand and digest this chaotic finale to this album. Every single lyric on this track is from another track. It opens with this nice spot that I found connected to the ground. I'm staying here all night, staring at the open sky until my eyes bleed. That stanza is. It starts out so serene and then it just switches to ridiculous, which is the same thing I said in Spherical Perspective. Is that the one that popped up in? It says, now where should I go and how to escape? I think that's End of Dormancy, when he was running from the government agents. In a coil, ride the void, past destroyed, spirit interface, in the crust, from the lost, all across, life regenerate. That's always moving. The part that kind of confused me. We have the wake. Look up at the sky and see me passing by. That's End of Dormancy also, I think. Or maybe that is, no, that's Spherical Perspective again. You live alone, the dream is gone, your time is done, obsolete beings. I can go through this all day long. There's, I don't know, 15 stanzas here, and every single one of them is a stanza in mostly completion from another track. Having read them in order doesn't change anything. I can't see a pattern between the order that they are in this list versus the order in the album. I can't see a pattern storyline or narratively of why these stanzas would be in an order. It just seems to be kind of randomly picked. I think that supports my idea of just sort of going through your past at the end of your life. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be the end of your life, but I kind of perceive the Earth to be dead here, or at least humanity as a race, as this album is wrapped up. I mean, there's the virus, there's the water rising, there's the war that's going on between everyone, there's the division. I mean, Event Horizon was pretty clear that this planet of theirs wasn't. I laugh because otherwise I'd cry, because I was going to say this planet of theirs isn't doing well, but of course it is social commentary, so our planet isn't doing well. Like I said, I assume maybe their bodies pass and they're spiritually elevated. I have no idea. But for whatever reason, we're just kind of scatter-shotting lyrics from across the album and putting them in some sort of order here. And it's chaotic, just as chaotic as the music sounds to me. I couldn't find a rhyme or reason for many of the shifts, the harsh transitions between concepts throughout this final track. The sections were whiplash, atmospherically and emotionally. It's an experience to get through, and it is interesting to sort of pick up on things too. You just start thinking, wait, that's familiar. And that's familiar too. I think I've heard that before. I know those lyrics. And you start to piece together that whole concept of, okay, this is bits and pieces of the album. But the thing that eludes me is why. I think I might be close with my guess of it being related to death and viewing your life previously. But I don't know 100%, and it doesn't seem that the album wants to tell me, at least directly. But maybe y'all have a different opinion on it. Maybe you have a different perspective. Maybe you agree with me, but you know something I don't. Maybe repeat listens has granted you a bit of insight into this album that I don't have. These are my thoughts, though, on Voivod's, what is this called? I don't know what this is called. The Wake. Yeah, I completely forgot that was the name of this. I was about to call it Obsolete Beings. The Wake. What are your thoughts, though? put anything you'd like to add to the conversation, or to inform me about things, or to correct me if you think I misspoke on anything. Put all of that down into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. I won't be back tomorrow for a live stream. I won't be back on Monday either, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'll be back next Saturday, though, for an album review. And then after that, we'll be back to the usual stuff. So the 1st of August, we'll have the album review. And the 2nd, we'll have a live stream. And the 3rd, we'll be back to daily reactions. But from the 27th to the 31st, there will be no, I guess the 26th through the 31st, there will be no videos, no live streams, nothing. I'm taking a little bit of a break at the end of summer here, as I usually do, just allow myself to recharge a little bit before diving back into the latter half of the year. All right, so I will see you all next week. Have a fantastic week yourselves. Listen to some great music. Take some time to catch up on, my reactions, if you'd like, but probably more importantly, music. There's been a lot of great stuff that's come out this year, so certainly dive into some of that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.